So for me, it just ticked over to 12:01 here in St. Paul, so we'll go ahead and get things started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be joining us from. My name is Scott Anton. I manage business development with Gideon Taylor, and I am excited to be introducing this Lunch and Learn session hosted by University of South Carolina, and I'll introduce the folks there here in just a moment. But for those of you who aren't familiar with Gideon Taylor, we have been helping organizations drive greater value within their PeopleSoft and Oracle systems for the last 23 years. And a big part of that has been GT eForms, which is what was used as the basis for the solution that University of South Carolina is going to be discussing and demonstrating today, their grants, time and effort reporting solution. We host these Lunch and Learn webinars typically on a monthly basis, allowing organizations to see and learn about eForms-based solutions and other technology-based solutions that our clients are building out around the world. And it's exciting for us because there are a lot of really unique applications, unique business processes that our clients are automating and building out, sometimes with our help, sometimes entirely on their own. And it's awesome to see the value that they are getting out of their enterprise software systems, namely PeopleSoft and Oracle. Or just a quick housekeeping comment, if people have questions as we go along, you can go ahead and enter those into the chat or the Q&A. We'll be monitoring both of those throughout the course of the webinar, and happy to take a pause and respond to those as they come in. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. Deanna Sloop from the University of South Carolina is the program manager for PeopleSoft HCM. Chris Poore is a senior HR systems analyst with the university. And Lindsay Cox is the director of compliance and tax at the University of South Carolina. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Deanna. Deanna, it's all yours.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. Very excited to be here today and share with you our time and effort eForm that we developed along with Gideon Taylor. I am going to share my screen. So we have Chris Poore. He's on my team for HCM support. And Lindsay Cox, she is our director for compliance and tax, and she's what we call our grants administrator. So she kind of runs the reporting process for the university. So I'm going to turn my camera off and share my screen, and we'll get into it. Okay, so we made our introductions. Just to give you a little background on the university, we consist of 8 universities across 20 locations, which is 8 campuses. And today, most of those campuses are closed because of inclement weather, but thankful for remote work, we can still do this webinar for you today. Our fall enrollment for last year was over 53,000 students campus-wide, and you see the breakdown of those students. Employee-wise, we produced over 20,000 W-2s for 2023. We have 2 time reporting periods for our sponsored projects each year. They usually run from January to June and then July to December. And each reporting period, we execute around 3,200 forms. So we went live with PeopleSoft in 2015 for finance, and then we followed a few years later with HCM. We first rolled out HR, payroll, base benefits, and commitment accounting, and then later time and labor and absence management. We're currently on image 9.2, 46, and our people tools, it's 8.60, and we're getting ready to upgrade that pretty soon. And we partnered with Gideon Taylor when we went live with HCM. We had developed a lot of ePaths for hire, student hire, job change, and we've added a lot of forms since then. And we also have 2 forms that we're working on, planning on replacing our employee employee performance management system, and we also have a form coming out for the herd survey. So when we went live with PeopleSoft HCM, we didn't have a new solution for time and effort reporting, and our old time and effort reporting process was very manual. A lot of times when you do big implementations, you get your focus is to get live, and then a lot of the reports kind of come afterwards. Our old time and effort reporting process was pretty much paper forms. It took almost a year to close out a reporting period. We had no automated reporting. The tracking was manual. And at the time, we were struggling with designing custom reports to satisfy this need. And they really would have replicated what we already had. We weren't leveraging our new ERP and our integrations between finance and HCM. So our solution was we partnered once again with Gideon Taylor to create our new time and effort ePath. And with this ePath and the reporting process, all of our reports or forms, and I'll use the terms report and form kind of interchangeably through this presentation, but all of the reports are created in one batch process for the selected reporting period. And our grant administrator, who's Lindsay, she can determine what that reporting period is. So she can select the dates for each reporting period. So you have that flexibility. If you want to do 6 months, if you need to do 9 months, you can. If you needed to do a year. When we first went live, I think our reporting period was at least 12 months, it might have been 15 months. So email notifications are automatically sent to employees, principal investigators, and supervisors to certify reports. And there's a link to the report in the email. The process automatically pulls eligible earnings for sponsored projects and all other earnings per employee on one form for ease of certification. Another benefit, corrections to earnings are easily identified, and we can create adjusted reports, which will reroute through the approval process. And we have new reporting capabilities because all data on the form can be queried. So that was a big plus for us. And then we also have a BI publisher certification document that's created for each employee on each form. And I'm going to show you that a little later too. I think our two biggest gains, our most recent reporting period was completed in less than 3 months. You know, as I mentioned earlier, it was taking sometimes up to a year to completely close out a period. And 90% of those forms were completed within 30 days, which is our deadline. We ask that everything is certified in 30 days. And we met 90% last time, so pretty proud of that. And there's no paper now. That's really huge for us. If you're in this webinar, I'm assuming you know what time and effort is, but just in case you're not, I wanted to include it in the presentation. So effort is the portion of time spent on a given activity expressed as a percent of total activity for which an individual is employed by the institution. And that activity can include teaching, clinical practice, research, preparing proposals, etc. But effort on the report must equal 100%. And I'll show you an example of that. So why does certification matter? Salary is the largest expense on all of our sponsored awards. So this is our biggest risk for exposure. The Univ guidance requires internal controls to be in place to support effort expended on federal awards. So this is the law. And effort documentation must provide reasonable assurance that amounts charged are accurate, allowable, and properly allocated. And of course, I mean, there are legal ramifications. Once a form is completed, it's considered a legal document for the university, and it's subject to audits, and it's extremely common for effort reports to be requested during an audit. And risk of non-compliance, as you know, is really huge. We could have funding taken away, have other systems and controls that would be required to put in place, and there all could be other legal ramifications. So we want to be compliant. All right, so for our time and effort reports, who should expect to get one? A time and effort report is going to be automatically generated for any individual who has salary paid from a sponsored project or is cost shared to a project. And that's going to include direct payroll charges, payroll transfers, late or retroactive payroll adjustments. And it's not just our salaried faculty that will get a report. All of our hourly employees, including students and temps, get a report that has to be certified. And who needs to review and certify an effort report? When we run the process, the business managers for each department, they will verify that the information on the report is correct, and they will release it to the employees. So the employees will have to review and certify. The principal investigator on the projects will have to review and certify, and the employee's supervisor. Time and effort reports, they're assigned to departments and business managers based on the home department on their primary job. So that is what we build our workflow on, and that's how it's going to route to these business managers and the supervisors. So the system, it ensures that our principal investigators and supervisors are also part of this certification process, which is very important for us. So once it's certified by the employee, the principal investigator, and the supervisor, that's when the form is considered fully complete or executed. And just to go over the roles that you're going to hear me talk about, our grant administrator, today that is Lindsay Cox. She is responsible for our reporting process, and the grants administrator is the person in the system that will go in, create the reporting period. She will run that batch process that generates all of the time and effort reports with one process. If corrections are needed, she can run that batch process again, and it's going to create an adjusted report. And she also trains the end users on the university on the reports. And she works closely with my team, the support team, if there are any modifications that are needed to the form, like development-wise, or if there are any issues with the form that we may need to contact Gideon Taylor to help us with. Our business manager, like I said, it plays a very important role. They verify the accuracy of the report when it's first released. And once they verify that, they're going to release it to the employee. They serve as the central point of contact during the reporting process. If a correction is needed, they are going to perform the journal entry and finance that gets pulled over into HCM, which allows us to create an adjusted report. And as I mentioned before, the business manager's row security determines the employees that roll up to that business manager. The employee, as I mentioned before, anyone that has payroll directly charged to a sponsored project or a cost share on a sponsored project will have a report generated for them. And they have the duty of reviewing the report and certifying that the percentages are a reasonable representation of how their time was spent during that reporting period. our principal investigators. They're the individuals responsible for the administration of the research grant. And we received the list of the PIs from finance. Our project team table is populated from finance via the integration broker. So that's how that information feeds over. And once again, leveraging that integration between finance and HCM. So the responsibilities for the PI in the reporting process, they're going to review the salary charge, make sure it's correct. If they see an issue with the report, they're going to contact the business manager and let them know what the correction needs to be. And this is just like a general overview of the process. So as I mentioned before, the Grants Administration Office, which is Lindsay Cox and her group, they're going to do the setup and create the reporting period and run the batch process. That's going to create all reports for all eligible employees. And they send an email, like a blast email to the business manager saying, hey, we just ran the process and your reports for this reporting period are available. And the business manager, after they verify that, they're going to release the report. And it's at this point, so when the form is first created, it's in a save status. It's not until that business manager releases the report that the status turns to saved. And that's where the workflow is populated. So it's going to switch from saved to pending, and it's going to go into the employee's queue. So every step in this process, it goes from employee, the employee certifies, then it goes to the principal investigators. If it's correct, they certify it. At any point, if they see an error, they're going to recycle the form, which sends it back to the business manager. The business manager will make the necessary corrections with a retro journal entry, which will feed over to HCM, and then the grants administrator can then run the batch process again, which will create an adjusted report for that employee. So it's the same process you're running. It's just, it'll find any adjustments on a staging table and create an adjusted report. Other things I wanted to point out, let me go to this workflow here. So our form has a unique workflow that we don't have on any other form. It's called the parallel stage. So when the report is released to the employee, they will approve and certify. And then it goes to this parallel stage that has all of the principal investigators that employee had salary charged to for that reporting period. And, during that time, the employee could have salary that's charged to multiple projects that have multiple principal investigators. So once it reaches that stage, we didn't want to say, okay, number one PI has to approve, and then it goes to the second PI, and then it goes to the third PI. The form goes to all PIs at the same time, and it doesn't go to the next step until each PI has approved or certified the form. Another thing that we have on this form is if the employee is also a PI, they only have to go in and certify the rows on the form one time. So if they certify it as the employee, it's also going to certify their row as the PI. And the same if the PI is the supervisor, he's going to certify that row as the PI, and it's also going to approve the supervisor stage. Okay, so we're going to get into the actual system now. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, as the grant administrator, how easy it is to actually run the batch process and create forms for a period. Like I said, we can say what the dates are for that reporting period. And we also have the eligible earnings codes that are applicable for that period, and they're copied from the previous period. And then there's also, if we need to exclude projects from the reporting period for any reason, we have a table where we can go in and list those. Right now, I think the main projects that are excluded are college work study or federal work study projects. We do not certify those in this process. And then we just go in and choose the reporting period and run. But I'm going to log into the system real quick and switch screens. Okay. So I'm in one of our lower environments, and I was going to show you how, what has to be done to do the setup for reporting period. So we have this navigation under eForm Solution Setup, and we have this folder just for grant reporting. This is where Lindsay would go in and create a reporting period for the next period. And it's as simple as, just clicking a plus sign here, and we can name it whatever we want. I'm just going to name this July through December 2024. And then you can go in and pick your dates. And as you can see, there's this tab here for earnings codes. And these are all of the eligible earnings codes for that reporting period. And so Lindsay has the ability to add or delete these earnings codes as needed. And I'm just going to save. And I showed you on the slide, if she needed to exclude any projects from this reporting period for any reason, she could add or delete projects here. And then to run the process, I'm not going to run it because it'll take a while, but here you just choose the reporting period that you would want to run it for and click run. So this process, it creates your batch reports for that reporting period. And then throughout that reporting period, as corrections are made, you just run it again for that same reporting period, and it's going to pick up adjustments and pull it into the report. So I'm going to actually go through and process a form as a business manager, an employee, a principal investigator, and supervisor, just so you can see what this looks like. And before I log in, I'm just going to show you what it looks like in our tool. So this is a form that I created just for testing purposes. And right now you can see, it was created, and that's all that's done. So it's been released to the business manager. So I'm going to log in on another window as a business manager. And we can see how the form changes status through the process. And Lindsay, feel free to add anything as we go along.
You're doing great, Deanna.
Losing my voice. So I'm logged in as a business manager. And we have a grant time and effort form tile here. And you'll notice the business manager has a task here that the other roles aren't going to have, and that's update a grant form. And this is how he's actually going to release the form. So if I go in, okay, so let me show you this workflow for just 1 second, because this has our mask data. So the employee, like I said, will approve the form, and then it's going to go to the principal investigators. This is an example of a principal investigator that is also the supervisor. So when he certifies, it's going to approve all of these steps. And just 1 second, I'm going to log out here.
No worries, Deanna. Thank you very much for for doing this on the fly. I was going to comment that for those folks on the call that aren't already using GT eForms, I think the best way to think about the tool is it allows you to create your own PeopleSoft-based custom applications, a lot of it through configuration to automate really any kind of business process requirement you might have. The grant time and effort reporting solution that USC launched a couple of years ago is a really great example of that, something that that dovetails with delivered PeopleSoft functionality really well when you're looking at grants management. And it is one of a few solutions that organizations have built out to automate grants related processes. Another big one is grants pre-award management, which is also an eForms based solution that precedes it. It's the early part, obviously, of the grants process, gathering all of the information and data and documents associated with the grants application and managing all that as a workflow enabled PeopleSoft based process that then dovetails and integrates with the delivered PeopleSoft grants module. So just as an FYI, to give folks some additional perspective.
Okay. All right, I'm going to do another form. Just so you know, our grant administrator does have the ability to add a form like ad hoc to with the process. So that's what I just did. Okay, here we go. I do apologize for that. Some other testing is going on. So this is a form that's been released to the business manager. And like I said, this is all not real data. And the first step that we have in the process for the business manager, they are going to look at these charges for that reporting period and just validate that this is accurate. There's a tool in finance that they check expenses against. And so they are going to acknowledge, and we have this attestation statement that, to the best of my knowledge, I confirm this report reflects all current payroll actions and requests. And they're going to toggle that to yes and submit. And each step when you submit, you can then see the approval route for that form. And as you can see, the next step on this form is going to go to the employee. And then you see this employee had charges to these two projects. So after the employee certifies, it's going to go to the principal investigator. So now I'm going to log in as the employee so you can see what they do to certify. And as I mentioned before, the business manager had the update action and the employee does not have that. So the employee can certify a grant report or view a grant report. So I'm going to do this one. This is the one that I just created. So on the form, I just want to point out that it has two grids. We have our sponsored accounts grid. So these are the charges on any sponsored account. And then our grid below is our university accounts grid. So that's all other charges. And like I said, you can query this information, which we do a lot. And if you needed to see the detail behind these charges, you can just click this little box here, and that's going to show you the expense during that reporting period. And it has it by check date and by earning code. And you can do that for each of the lines. So if there's ever a question, that just helps with the research to see, like, maybe, that check wasn't right that day, or maybe we need to reclass that check. It's just very helpful for our employees and the PIs. So as the employee, you're going to compare this to our finance tool to make sure you agree with the amounts and the percent of pay effort that's calculated. And like we said, it has to be 100%. This isn't a real reporting period, but if the employee agrees with all the charges, they just toggle the no to yes, and all lines have to be toggled by the employee to yes. If you wanted to add attachments, you can do that. And then they can just approve. And so now you can see, if we look at the approval route, it's now going to our principal investigator. And in this example, Oaks Mark is the PI and us for 2 of the projects. So I'm going to log in as our PI. Lindsay, anything you want to add on here?
No, you're explaining it perfectly well.
Okay.
Deanna, there's a question in the chat. Andy Clark asked if the eForms generator that you had shown, if it's something that's delivered with the tool set with GT eForms, and I don't know what that's referring to. I think he posted the question prior to you showing us the form. You were going through the eForm admin tool. And I don't know, did you have something that automatically generates an eForm? Were you showing something earlier? I apologize.
The batch process that creates the forms, I think is what he's asking about. So, I mean, that is so that is a batch process that was created with GT. I don't think it's delivered. And there was some that.
Yeah, that is, Andy, that is a frequent request to initiate eForms based processes with a batch. And hopefully that answers your question. If not, go ahead and pose anything further in the chat. Happy to respond. Thanks, Deanna.
Okay, no problem. So then I'm now logged in as the PI, and as you see, the lines are still toggled yes. So he doesn't have to toggle them if he agrees with them, leave them as yes. If the PI thinks there's a problem, they would click recycle, which would send it back to the business manager. But the PI has to click yes here for acknowledgement because that's their attestation statement as the PI. I'm just going to approve. And as I showed on the other screen, Oaks Mark is also the supervisor for this employee. So when he approved the form as the PI, it also approved for him as his supervisor because he doesn't need to go back and log in and go through the process again. Okay, so we mentioned the BI publisher certification report, so I do want to show that. They just have to click print, and it's going to produce a report online. If any of the approvers had put comments on the form, you have the ability to print the BI report with the comments or without. Sometimes, there's special notes in there that you don't want to show in your final report. But I just want to show our BI publisher report. So it's going to give you the employee information. It gives you this action here. Was it certified? Yes or no? You have the amount for that reporting period, details about the project, what makes up the rest of their effort for that period. And then there's also a transaction log. So it shows when the report was created and as it went through all the approval steps. And then we have our attestation statements here on this form. So that is pretty much, the process. It's pretty simple. Like I said, especially simple to create the batch process for reporting period. It's just a couple of steps. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint slide. Any questions on the form itself before I move off of it?
So if anybody was just curious in terms of the timing that takes, that's usually the average.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I take screenshots of everything because we have this storm going on. I was afraid if I couldn't get in the system, I had some backup that we can share with you. This is an example of the email that is sent. So as you go through each step of the approval process, the next approver is going to get an email letting them know there's a report for you to approve. It tells you the reporting period, your form ID, and it even has a link so you can just click there and go straight to the form itself, so you don't have to go to the tile as I did. Real quick, what if a correction is needed? So we don't use the retro distribution process in HCM very often. We use it in rare cases. So if a correction is needed, the business manager has to request a retro journal entry on the finance side. And those, we call them RPAs. So those journal entry adjustments, they're sent to HCM each day. We have an interface that sends those, and we pull them into a staging table. And when Lindsay runs this batch process again, for that same reporting period, it's going to check that staging table to see if any journal entries were made for any employees during that reporting period. And as you see, this is the output of that batch process. And you can see right here, it says found new corrections on the staging table. So that's letting us know, there was a report that was adjusted and that needs to be sent back through the approval process. And I don't have a form online that I can show you, but this is an example, a screenshot of a form that did have an adjustment. So this is the detail from the report. And if you click on the detail tab, you can see where $720 was moved off of this project. So those adjustments do come through and you can see them very easily on your form.
Deanna?
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat as to how long the implementation took from beginning to end. And if you could comment on how that broke out between like requirements analysis and design versus implementing the system, that would be awesome.
Oh, okay. So we started this process shortly after we went live. So we went live in April 2019 with HCM. And we started gathering requirements and design in the fall of 2019. And then COVID, the pandemic hit in 2020. So I think we ran our first report, I want to believe it was in the fall of 2021. And we did it for, I think, April 2019 through July of 2020, if that helps. So,
Okay.
yeah, so we just went live, with our ERP, started working on this that fall, and pandemic hit. We're all sent home and continued working on it, of course, through that. But I believe it was fall of 2020 when we went live.
Okay.
But I'll find that
Thank
out.
you. And then a follow-up question: how far back did your organization go with regards to legacy and historical data?
So we started with HCM data. We didn't use this tool to pull legacy data. So
Okay.
that's why we started with it was April 2019. And that's why our first reporting period was bigger than the normal 6 months. We went back and did, it was either 12 or 18 months. I'd have to look at that. Well, I can look at the reporting period just one moment.
So say, Deanna, I have an old one pulled up and it looks like it was April through December 2019.
Okay, thank you. So
Great, thank
that
you.
is the beauty, you can change your reporting periods. You can make them whatever you want that suits your institution. Okay. Any more questions before the next
Not yet.
presentation?
I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay. So I just want to mention, since everything on the form can be queried, we've done a lot with reporting for grants. And Chris, who's on the call, he created this reporting tile for our business manager. So if you can see, it says my grant reports. So if they click on that tile, they have all of these queries that they can run just to help them stay on top of the forms that they need to manage for that reporting period, or if they need to look back at older reporting periods as well. And also for Lindsay's office, we have lots of queries that we provided for them to help them stay on top of how many forms are pending, how many, if there are any in error, what percentage are complete at any given point in time. Didn't know if you wanted to look at any of the setup pages that my group handles. I can show you those real quick. Lindsay, while I'll pull that up, you want to talk to them about our decision with business managers at Go Live and how we might possibly change that?
Sure. So as Deanna mentioned, the first step in the process after our team generates the reports and makes them available, the business manager is responsible for doing a basically first level validation of that report. So they're going in, just making sure that everybody looks reasonable from like a high level departmental standpoint. And then they are submitting that to approvers. So it's not even reaching the approvers until the business manager does that validation. So I wasn't involved with the implementation of this, but my understanding with history is, based on the feedback that was given at the time, the business managers, wanted that active role in reviewing the reports. But as we, get more accustomed to the process, more comfortable with it, we're starting to reevaluate the value of that step. So we're going to start exploring whether we think that first level validation from the business manager is actually necessary, or when we generate the report, should it then immediately go to the first approver, which would be the employee. So that's something just from, an organizational standpoint, we're going to start exploring just to see if we can make the process more streamlined, more meaningful by potentially removing that first step from the process.
Yeah. So as we've matured, as an institution on HCM and with this new tool, I think, that would be a good step. Because as I mentioned before, the workflow isn't drawn until the business manager releases it. And that's once it goes to that pending stage, that's when your workflow is drawn.
And currently we're not experiencing a significant volume of business managers pushing back on any of the reports. So it's not as if we're finding like a high volume of errors that they're catching on the front end or anything like that. So that's one of the reasons why we're starting to kind of wonder value add that's really with that step.
Okay, so these last few minutes, I was just going to show you the form setup pages that we have. So the grant administrator doesn't have access to these pages. This would be HCM support. So Chris or me can update these pages. And this is under the Manage GT eForms menu. So I don't know if there's have any questions like the routings. This is where we have our path for the employee, the parallel stage and the supervisor stage. And there's people code behind here to control the logic of how the forms are sent. Something I did want to mention. So the example I showed you, those were pretty clean examples. Everyone in the workflow was active. If you have an employee that's inactive when the form is created, it's going to skip that employee stage and go to the next stages. And the supervisor is like responsible for certifying, that effort on the employee's behalf. And if there is a supervisor that is inactive or blank, the form goes into error. So the business manager would have to reach out to Lindy's group, and we'd have to put a valid supervisor in there because you have to have that certification. And these are, the things that we can do through configuration. We worked with a GT developer for a while on this form. It does have a lot of people code and logic in it. So, because it's a pretty complex form, but it's saved, the university tons of hours, and it's been a really good tool for us so far. And it's going to show you we do have these query. So all of these tables here we can query. That's all I had. Do you have any more questions in the chat?
Just looking at Brad's comment, we started working with GT in August of 2019 and implemented the solution in March, April of 2020. Thank you. I appreciate that, Brad.
Yeah. Yeah, Brad was involved in the development of the form.
Does anybody else have any questions in the last few minutes that we have? We will be sending out a link, obviously, to the recording to everybody who registered. So if you want to share that with others, or if there are aspects of this that you want to review, you're certainly welcome to. And Deanna, that was great. Both the introductory detail that you provided on PowerPoint and the demo that you provided, that was an awesome overview.
All right, well, thanks. I'm glad we were able to get it in. Of course, the day I get scheduled to do a presentation, we have a tropical storm coming through. And the campus closes down, but
right. I wasn't even thinking about that until you mentioned it today. So thanks for being a trooper.
no problem. All right. If there are any
Oh,
questions that
There
you
is
get,
there's one other question that just came in, Deanna. Is there a bottleneck with the requirement of having the employees certify? If so, how are those monitored and managed via the system?
Mm. Lindsay, do you want to answer that?
In terms of bottleneck, is that just you're referring to like a lag in the process waiting for them to certify? That's how I'm interpreting that. Is that correct? Okay, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a case by case basis depending on the employee, I would say. So like as we've gone through this process, like problem children probably isn't the right term, but you'll have those people that every reporting period there's going to be a delay with processing it. And we rely on our business managers to help us with monitoring those and reaching out to the employees. But we also do some central monitoring as well. As Deanna had mentioned, we have quite a few queries that we're able to run that show us the statuses that the effort reports are in. So we're able to use those to basically do like outreach centrally as well. And typically those efforts work, but it's a lot of kind of just like nudging a little bit until you finally get action. But overall, it's not bad, I wouldn't say from the employee stage. But again, it's kind of just a case by case basis based on department, I would say.
Yeah, and Lindsay, probably that 10%, that did take a while to certify. It's probably the same repeat.
That's exactly right.
Each time.
I'm not seeing.
Yeah, when we first rolled it out, I had someone a professor call me and argue with me for an hour. He wanted me to print the form for him to sign it. So
and I will
Old
say
habits die hard.
there are a few approvers that we have that they either have trouble logging into the system or just really struggling with it. And from an efficiency standpoint, just trying to get the process wrapped up, there are some users where we will allow them to sign a PDF copy. And there's an option from the administrative side for us to then insert that into the form and then just push it along ourselves. So that's done on a very, very limited basis, but that feature is there if, for whatever reason you have somebody that can't access the report. Mm-hmm. And Marjorie, I also see that you asked about a reminder feature. We don't use a reminder feature in the system aside from those automatic emails that are generated telling them that there's a report ready for approval. But Deanna, I don't know if you can speak more on if that functionality exists and we're just not using it or anything else with that.
Yeah, we could look at sending out reminders. Of course, that's something we could look at. If something's pending, it's aged by so many days, we could send out notifications. And we also are looking at the notification framework that was just released, I think, this past year, to see how we can leverage that with some of our business processes. So we don't do it today, but it's something that we can look at for you.
Great.
And we weren't looking for work on this call. No, I'm joking. Always looking at how to improve.
Very good. I don't see any other questions coming in, so we can go ahead and wrap up. Probably Deanna, Lindsay, any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. Overall, I think it's a great tool.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, thank you, Deanna, Lindsay, Chris, and even Brad online. Thank you all for your help this afternoon. This is great to see, and thanks for sharing. For everybody who did register, we will be sending out email notifications for the next Lunch and Learn, which I think is already scheduled for September. Scott Livingston, do we have that on the calendar already?
I think that's in the final details, if I remember right. But yep, as soon as that's up, we'll get that out. And in fact, I'll send that with the recording to everybody. So
fantastic. Thank you. The thing to keep in mind with these Lunch and Learns is even if it's not a solution that is immediately relevant for your institution or your organization, it's a great way of seeing how other organizations have used a variety of different features and functionality within the GT eForms tool to accommodate whatever their business process requirements are. So come into these things with an open mind in terms of how you can apply those different aspects of a particular solution to meet your unique requirements. That's it for us. Thank you all for joining. We appreciate it and look forward to seeing you on future webinars.